Yeah.
Oh, there we go. All right, bye guys.
Okay, I have an Excel spreadsheet ready. Let's see, if I click on share, does that get me where I need to go?
Hopefully.
Okay. Uh, this is a training on intake interviews, how to do intake interviews. And I'm trying to give you the benefit of 50 years of experience. This is something I've done 3,000 times and share with you some details of how it's done and what you need to do. Uh, this is the third in the series. With your permission, I'll go back a little bit because I've redone some of these earlier slides. Or these aren't slides. This is a Excel spreadsheet, which is how I do them. I have an Excel spreadsheet in my hand of the questions, and I write out the answers with a pen. So going back to revisit the goals of the intake interview, of course, we're gathering information about the client. We also, by the end of the intake, we should have developed an initial treatment plan together with the client. We may begin therapy during that first interview. There's an interpersonal dimension that we're beginning a relationship. Um, the intake interview is actually the second step in the therapy process. The first step is when they contact our office manager and fill out the documents online. And then the second step is the intake interview. So from the interpersonal dimension, this is part of a process and not an isolated event. Number five, the intake interview is a great opportunity to instill hope. We'll say more about that when we get toward the end of the interview. And there's also a psycholegal dimension. You want to uh, create the forms that you need to create in your file, and you need to find out the information you need to know to protect yourself against possible accusations of malpractice. What happens if I expand this a little bit? Okay, make it a little easier for me to read. And I'm going to close the window with our faces on it. So if you have something to say, please just shout it out because I won't be able to see anything. With your permission, let's go over the interpersonal dimension again. You're beginning a therapeutic relationship. So you want to create an environment in which the client feels comfortable talking about themselves. That's the kind of therapy I like to do. I like it when clients tell me about themselves because therapy is very individual. I don't come at therapy with lectures about how to be or how to act. I want to get the client telling me about themselves. So I want to put the client at ease in a comfortable environment, use a relaxed and non-threatening tone of voice. Pacing and leadings are concepts from neuro-linguistic programming, which was big in the 1970s when I was trained. Um, who knows what pacing is? I don't need to go over this if you know this stuff already. Who can tell me what pacing is in an interview? Uh,
Monitoring the pace upon which you ask questions and give answers. Uh,
pacing is you imitate the client.
okay.
If they speak at a slow rate, you match that. You don't talk real fast if they're talking very slowly because they may feel alienated, and vice versa. If they're talking fast, you don't want to talk excessively slowly. They'll wonder if something's wrong with you. So you want to match the rate at which they speak, the volume at which they speak, the emotional intensity at which they speak, and relate If they're animated with gestures, you want to be the same way. Pacing, you imitate the client. And leading is slowly leading them into a more relatable condition. If, for example, if they're hyper, angry, talking fast, whatever, you want to pace that and then gradually slow your voice, relax your body posture, those things to lead them into a condition more conducive to relating. So pacing and leading. Engaging the client in a warm and friendly relationship. So be non-judgmental, very important. Be responsive and be human. We're not just gathering information, but we want to respond in a human way. And I've broken that down a little bit. There are affirmations. For example, if a client tells you something like, I've been married for 45 years, and the tone of voice tells you that they think it's a long time. You can write down in your notes, yes, client's been married for 45 years. But in part of creating a relationship, you reflect the emotional tone of what they're saying, like, well, that's a long time. Or they may say, my son proposed to his wife after he had known her only 5 weeks. And they're making a point there. So you're getting information, but it's also good to respond to the emotional tone of what they're saying. You say, wow, that's really a short time. Another element is feedback. For example, you look like you're ready to cry, and it's an interesting thing, but lots of people don't know when they're ready to cry. We are an odd kind of creature who can't see our own face, and it's not unusual. Someone's eyes tear up and turn red, and their face looks real sad, and they are completely unaware of it. So I may say, you look like you're ready to cry, and they say, no, I'm not. That happens. When people show emotion, like crying, I may say, this seems to be touching something deep inside you. The point being, you don't want to let those emotions just slip by you without giving a human reaction to them, a therapeutic reaction to them. Show sympathy, for example. Well, that's horrible. Natalie, thank you for telling us a few weeks ago that a therapist has to have 50 ways to say this.
Mhm.
Remember saying that to us?
I think so.
That say, oh, that's awful, that's horrible, that's terrible, and saying it in a tone of voice that reflects sympathy.
Right.
Mhm.
Another effective way at establishing a relationship with a client is triangulation. When someone has hurt them, you agree with them and take their side. For example, if they tell you what a jerk their professor is, you could say, well, he never should have treated you that way. If a person's in a conflict or has been traumatized and you take the side of the other person, if you take the side of the victimizer or the traumatizer, you may lose the relationship. For example, if you say, well, maybe your professor had a reason, maybe he was trying to teach you something, maybe he was having a bad day, whatever. If you take the offender's side, you risk damaging the relationship. And finally, silence. Know when to keep your mouth shut. It's very important. You don't want to talk too much during these interviews. Part D, avoid creating resistance or defensiveness. That's why we don't ask why questions. The word why makes people defensive. Use their own vocabulary and give it back to them. For example, if a person says, I felt crushed, use that word back. Okay, tell me more about this time you felt crushed. Because the word has some significance to them, and by using their own word, you're building that relationship. Don't talk about yourself. Clients are checking you out to see how much you can keep your focus on them. There are exceptions to triangulation. Don't take their side against a spouse, parent, or sibling, because that may backfire. the client may be saying to themselves that you have no right to talk about their spouse, parent, or sibling in that way. They're the only one who can criticize their spouse, parent, or sibling. You're not allowed to do that. And finally, doing an intake interview is your opportunity to establish yourself as an authority in the field. For example, if you know the right questions to ask, you're establishing that you're an authority in the field. Okay, that's where we left off last time. Ask carefully worded questions. And let's identify two types of questions: information gathering questions and facilitative questions. Of information gathering questions, there are two kinds. There are open-ended questions and closed questions, of which there are several types. An open-ended question is one that does not lead to a specific answer. So a good one to ask at the beginning of an interview is, what can I do for you? A nice open-ended question designed to elicit a lot of information. And people in your training may tell you to ask open-ended questions, but there are limitations to that. There are situations in which you don't want to ask open-ended questions. There are also closed questions, of which there are several types, like fact questions that lead to a specific answer about a fact, like, for example, what is your race or ethnicity? There are yes or no questions that lead to a yes or no answer. For example, have you ever been a patient of a mental hospital? Leads to a yes or no answer. There are also either or questions. Are you right-handed or left-handed? And what I was trying to say about open-ended questions are not always appropriate. For example, I was employed by the state of South Carolina in the Department of Juvenile Justice. I interviewed 1,000 justice-involved youth for the state of South Carolina. And you can't ask that group an open-ended question because you will get nothing in reply. So I learned to design whole interviews asking only closed questions, mostly yes or no or either or questions. So if you're working with that population, it's good to learn how to structure your questions so the client says either yes or no or either or from two alternatives. And you can do that. You can structure a whole interview in that way. Then another type of questions, which is not information gathering, is the facilitative question. And this is one of my favorite. How comfortable are you talking to me about whatever? Like, how comfortable are you telling me what it is that you're crying about? And this is not only during intakes. I use this all through therapy. This is a great question. When people run into something they seem hesitant to tell you about, without being authoritarian and saying, you have to tell me this, because you may lose the relationship at that point if you push a person to tell you something. But a good way to keep the conversation going and maybe open up to that, getting that information, is to say, how comfortable are you telling me? For example, about sensitive topics like substance use, suicide, hallucinations, child abuse history, criminal history. How comfortable are you talking with me about that? Another example of a facilitative question is this getting to be too much? Sometimes our work with people overwhelms them, and I never want to do that. And I make that clear to people. I tell them I never want to do or say anything here that's going to overwhelm you. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, we're going to stop. We're going to change the subject. We're going to talk about something else. And clients find that very reassuring to know I'm not going to push them into places they don't want to go. A good intake interview has a sequence, beginning, a middle, and an end. I begin by introducing myself, explaining the rules of the practice. I start with a nice open-ended question with a cooperative adult, especially, what can we do for you? You're not going to get much response to that question with a reluctant client or a court-ordered client or a child or an adolescent. It's better to begin with them instead of beginning with, what can we do for you? Begin with a nice open-ended question on a positive note, like, tell me something good about yourself. Tell me something you're good at or smart at, or what do you do, or what do you like to do, or what do people like about you? What do people tell you they like about you? So start in a positive way with this kind of client who's not coming in as a cooperative, mature adult person who's ready to talk about their issues. The middle of the interview is where you gather your content. The end of the interview is good to save for more sensitive personal and pathological information, for example, regarding trauma, suicide, psychosis, history of abuse, criminal history, substance misuse. Save that stuff for the end of the interview, because if you ask it too early, the client may shut down. And please remember that questions are suggestions. For example, if you start with a lot of pathology-oriented questions, like, are you hearing voices? Do you think somebody's following you? Do you think somebody's trying to hurt you? These all may be good questions in an intake interview, but if you ask them too early, the client is thinking, well, God, this person thinks I'm crazy. Or what kind of place is this? Do they only work with crazy people here? So bear in mind that to you, it may be a question that just leads to information, but to the client, it's perceived as a suggestion that this is what you're going through. You're suggesting the person's hearing voices, or you suspect that they think somebody's trying to hurt them. B, I always want to establish at the end of the intake interview, is the client in crisis? I want to know that. Our licensing boards are part of the Department of Consumer Affairs, whose mission is to protect the public. So if a provider has someone in a crisis, we have to know it and we have to respond appropriately. C, this is Dr. Matthews' favorite question. What did I leave out? What did I not ask you at the end of the interview? What do you want to tell me that I did not ask? Chris, how would you word it in your intake interview?
Have I missed anything? Or actually, no, but I just did this. Is there anything I should know about you that you did not cover in your history or in your answers to your questions to me? Is there anything that I should know?
Very good question, and often elicits a lot of good information.
Often.
And at the end of the interview, you want to formulate the initial treatment plan. This is something we do together with the client. And I tell clients at the end of our intake, we will write your treatment plan together. And this is not something I do myself out of my own head, but this is something I do together with you to make sure that I understand you and understand what you need and how we can help you. And after reviewing the initial treatment plan with the client, I asked them, does that sound like a good plan? And get their approval, rewrite it until they approve it. And then I enter that in my note that the initial treatment plan was reviewed with the client and they gave their approval. And finally, this is your opportunity to instill hope at the end of an intake interview. The ending is very important. At the time I was writing this and doing this training, I was doing intake interviews for, I had a student last year, Mrs. Simpson. So I would close by saying, you have a lot of good qualities that are going to help you, get through this. For example, you have good relationships with people. You're good at expressing yourself. I can see you're intelligent. I can see you have a sense of humor. I can see you're really motivated to solve this problem, whatever. And then I'd say, I believe Mrs. Simpson is going to be a very good counselor for you. You don't want to end with something like, good luck, or gee, you got a lot of problems. I hope you get over them someday. You know, you don't want to end on a flat note. You want to be able to say something at the end to raise their hopes. Because they're probably coming to you with a serious problem that they've been dealing with for years or even decades, and they may not see much hope. So they're holding out for the possibility that you will be able to help them. So it's good to end on a note that instills hope. Okay, so here's the form that I actually fill out with a pencil while I'm talking to people, and we've just got a few minutes, so we'll just start it. And the actual form I use has more room between items. I've collapsed it to make it easier to read for our presentation. I want to know the person's preferred name. What do you want me to call you? How do you like to be known? Uh, get their phone number, make sure they have my phone number, make sure they have our office manager's phone number. This is the person to call with any questions about billing. Uh, Anything else, call me directly, and I give them my cell phone number. I tell them if you have to cancel an appointment, for example, or anything at all, just go ahead and call me directly. I use doxy.me, so I make sure they know how to sign in. I introduce myself. I say I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of California. But they were all seeing Mrs. Simpson for therapy when I wrote this form. So I'm supervising Mrs. Simpson. She's at Authentic Counseling until August. This is how I supervise her. I talk to her twice a week. I read all her written notes. She records sessions and I watch them, listen to them. So we'll be asking you for permission to record. And then I review the forms. I say, thank you for filling out our forms. There's just a few things I like to go over. Before we begin, the fee is your responsibility. I reassure Medicare people that we've never had any trouble with Medicare. Medicare is great. I remind them that we have a no-show or late cancellation policy. Say as part of your paperwork that you filled out for us, we have a no-show or late cancellation policy. Most people are good about keeping their appointments, but every now and then somebody, you might say, abuses the privilege. They make an appointment and then they don't keep it. And we cannot bill Medicare or any insurance company for a missed appointment. They will not pay. So in the event that you do miss an appointment or cancel on short notice, we do reserve the right to send you a bill. Confidentiality, I tell them our work together is confidential, but there are exceptions.
Oh, John, I'm sorry to interrupt, John.
Yes, no, speak up. Go ahead.
I was gonna to ask you, would you think it's important to add in addition to the no-show late cancellation policy? Because I do notice with Medicare, like sometimes our clients, they're approached by other folks on because we accept different parts of Medicare. So they're thinking, hey, Medicare is Medicare, but then we only technically only accept, I forget which part of Medicare. So when sometimes our clients unknowingly switch their Medicare plan to something that we don't accept, and we end up not being paid for it. So do you find it important to add that part in? Like, hey, if you decide to change even plans within Medicare, we need to be notified as soon as possible because we may not be able to accept it. So that's all I wanted to bring up. Like, what your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you. That sounds like a good point. I've not run into that myself, but it sounds like you have. So I was not even aware that had happened.
The funny thing, right, for me, right, John, it happened back to back with two different clients. So that's why And Betsy probably knows more about it than I would, but we ended up not getting paid for a couple of sessions, and then by the time we figured it out, and the client wasn't malicious at all. They just didn't know that they just assumed Medicare was Medicare, and they just received different benefits.
Well, good to know. Thank you for pointing that out. That changes what I said. I would say we've never had any trouble with Medicare, but I see now that that's not true. We have had trouble with Medicare. So I'll have to say what you said instead. Let us know if you change plans.
Yeah, and I believe Betsy has posted for ones that come into the office, she's posted signage regarding that. Like, please
Oh,
let us
good.
know if you change.
And if we're seeing this person for an intake, in general, she's already done the homework and they already are the correct flavor of Medicare. But what I believe David's referring to is if they change plans, they change flavors of Medicare, please call Betsy first to let her know so that we can continue your care or make sure we can if that's possible.
Yeah, I understand. For example, if somebody switches to Kaiser Medicare, they're probably not eligible to
Correct.
talk to us.
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I tell people our work together is confidential. There are exceptions, and they all have to do with protecting people from harm. For example, if you tell me you're going to hurt somebody, I have to call the police. If somebody ever tells me they have child pornography, I have to call the police. That's the law in California. So there are times I have to break confidentiality, and they all have to do with protecting people from harm. Now, there's a lot of other things that a therapist could do at the beginning here uh, to explain the little rules. For example, if I see you in public at a restaurant, I'm just going to walk by and not acknowledge you. But I don't get into all the little details of our rules and the behaviors at this point. I try to keep it short and move into the meat of the interview. So that's all I say about those things. I tell the patient, now we'll have an intake interview. I'm going to ask you things about your health, your life, your family, your schooling and education, your mental health, all kinds of things about you. And these are the things I need to know so that I can know how we can best help you. And at the end of this interview, you and I will write a treatment plan together. I caution people, number 9, this can be upsetting. Sometimes people get overwhelmed during these intake interviews, and that's not my intention. I never want to overwhelm anybody. So if you do feel overwhelmed by anything we talk about, we will stop and change the subject or try it another time. Because in these interviews, people are going to tell me all kinds of personal things about child abuse and pathology and things that they may be struggling with. And then there's a box on the intake form, on the intake note form. There's a box to enter this. So I have it here on my form. I just cut it and paste it into therapy notes. I provided client with my telephone number and the name and number of our office manager. I reviewed our office policies, including fee responsibility, methods of supervision, recording of interviews, no-show late cancellation policies and fee, confidentiality and limits of confidentiality. So there's a box on the intake note toward the top in therapy notes where you can just plug that in to show that you've passed that information on. And the next thing is the interview itself. Well, let's stop there. Let's not go any further. We've only got about 2 minutes, but if anybody has any reactions, let me stop sharing and see if your faces come back. Oh, they did. Okay, your faces came back. Very nice. So let's stop there and we'll pick it up another time.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you, John. I find this highly useful and organized. and I am going to use your form and spruce it up the way I like it. But it's a terrific skeleton.
Yes, do it. Take it, adjust it.
Yeah.
I keep changing it myself. This is the current iteration after 3,000 uses.
That's great. All right, folks. I will be seeing you all in your supervisions and on Thursday. Have a good week. And Pamela, why don't you stay on and we'll do our session.
Thank you. Also, Dr. C, you're still recording. Just want to let you know.
You are right.
Have a good day. See you Wednesday.
Okay. Let's see.
Hello, Dr. C.
Hi there. I'm
I know.
trying to get to the record here. Here we are.